What's up, you creepy fucks, and welcome to the Let's Talk Horror Channel podcast, and welcome to the Creep Zone, where we have very unrated, unfiltered conversations about something from the world of horror. On this episode, we are talking about, once again, a new movie. Something that I've been trying to do recently is covering a lot of the newer movies, for good or for bad. Some of the movies, it's quite known out there that if you know the channel, you know what I put out, you know that obviously I don't really pull my punches. I'll do it constructively, but I try and do everything I can to be very honest. And modern day horror can be very difficult for me because sometimes I want to be a little bit happier when I come out the cinema, and sometimes I don't want to be depressed as fuck with every single person dying and it being the most horrible thing. Although I've just genuinely thought that the movie we'll talk about does not end in a nice way. So I've completely contradicted myself already. So everybody's going to think I'm a fucking hypocrite, but fuck them. But obviously we're talking about Late Night with the Devil. And I can't even say the word devil. Late Night with the Devil. It's a movie that came out over here. Was it this year? I'm trying to think. It was 24 because I think it was the fact that it was out. It was supposed to be out in 2023, and I think then it ended up getting an official release on Shudder in 2024. So it is part of this year, which is nice because it's nice to have another movie from this year that's absolutely. I was going to say what I thought about it. Then I'm not going to do that. Otherwise, we might as well end the episode.
Yeah, right. Don't give it away.
Exactly. But so we get into that anyway. But with me, we have a top-notch, absolute friend of mine and the show. She's been on the show before. We have spoken about The Void. We have spoken about the Creep movies as well. Which I'm sure at some point off camera we'll probably have a good old conversation about the Creep tapes as well that are recently out. Yes. I'm plugging everything here. I'm plugging other shows and other movies and everything. But I have with me today on this episode Jordana from the Pretty Killer podcast. And you've got loads of things always in the work as well. But hello, Jordana. Welcome.
Hi, BP.
Back on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you today and talk about one of my most talked about movies of 2024. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, it's definitely the movie I think that I ended up promoing, because actually I don't know if you might have been as well, but I'm not. I sound like I'm bragging, but I'm not, because this never happened. But this was a movie that I actually got to see as a screener before it came out on Shudder.
Yeah.
And I got to do some promo stuff for it, and I ended up getting a suit that I found at the bottom of a drawer that was way too tight for me now. And I did some sort of old school 70s promo that worked out quite good.
Yeah.
And actually, funny enough, I think the review for it that I did is my most watched video on YouTube that I did.
I love it.
Well, nothing else is getting anywhere fucking close to that.
But that's why you gotta get in costumes of the people of the movies. You gotta get into,
that's it.
Different types of wardrobes and do it. But I got to see it too. I got to see that as a screener, and that I loved it. I really enjoyed.
No, that's fine. We'll get into it anyway. We're going to get into it. But also, it was cool doing that because it was a very, like you said, it was a very highly anticipated for yourself, but it was a highly anticipated movie for a lot of people. They brought out really cool posters for the promotion of it. They brought out really cool trailers that was really intriguing. Yeah. And it was just something that felt a little bit different. And obviously something in horror, we always bloody need something that's different.
Mm-hmm. You're 1,000% right on that. And that's what I think piqued my interest about this one, was just reading, the synopsis and what was going to happen. And I'm like, I'm here for it. Like a 70s exorcist possession type movie. Done.
Absolutely.
I'm in.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a really exciting film to be able to get to see. And now I'm really excited that we're going to get into talking about it all.
Yes.
So like I said, it was released 2024 on Shudder. It's directed by Cameron Carnes and Colin Carnes, which, as we all know, is probably pronounced completely wrong. Talking about pronouncing stuff completely wrong, we've got the film is starring Dan Dasmalchian. Now, I did look it up online, so that could be wrong. But
I think you're right.
That thing on Google.
I think you're right.
I did that thing where it goes Dasmalchian on Google.
I did too, because I was like, I don't want to butcher his name, but I think it's
Yeah.
Dash Malchin. Yeah.
That's Malchin. Yeah, that's it. I mean, and also I'm English anyway, so everything I say sounds fucking wrong anyway. Ingrid Torelli, Laura Gordon, Ian Bliss, Reese or Terry, that's definitely wrong. And obviously, there's loads more. And the legendary Michael Ironside, he's the narrator of the movie itself as well at the start and sort of throughout when it happens.
Yes.
On IMDb, it is 7 out of 10 and 97% on Rotten Tomatoes. So
Ooh.
it was a critical success, and I believe it to be a commercial success because I don't know if it still is, but I know when it came out, it was the highest streaming, however you word it, thing that Shudder had at a thing. It was it was the
Yes.
biggest streamed movie that they had. As I said, I don't know if that's the case still, but I mean, what a big accomplishment from such a small movie that they've
Yes.
got great critical response as well as being top notch on Shudder.
Yeah, I love that. I love the underdog. I love that it was an independent film. And from what I heard recently, this was like a 10-year in the making project by these guys. Like it took
Oh,
them
really?
years to get this, and it just shows like, the turtle wins, or the rabbit wins the race, because the time that they put into it, you can see it, you can feel it in this movie.
Yeah, it does. It does feel like, yeah, you're right. It does, when you sort of it's one of those movies where like the moments go into the other moments really well,
Hmm.
and it's not overthought, but it's really well put together. So then it makes sense that they would have been working on something like this for a while.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, so Google synopsis wise, luckily it's not a long one, but they put in 1977, a live television broadcast goes horribly wrong, unleashing evil into the nation's living rooms.
Love it.
That's basically it. I suppose
Hmm.
that's not bad. It doesn't give anything away. But what I love. So normally I say, when did you first see this movie? We've already spoken about it, and it's new, so we're not going to do that. So that's all. That's done. So we can get straight into talking about the movie. What I want to talk about is the immediate start of the movie
Hmm.
because of how many people it took to screw in this light bulb. If you get what so,
I
because at the start of this movie there is
Yes.
9 companies,
Yes.
and it's
That's so
hilarious.
long. I was like, is this a joke? Like when I got it, because I had to do it for my computer, the screening link. I'm like, did I do something wrong? Like, is it stuck on a
Yeah.
loop and it just kept going? And I was like, oh my God, it's like an hour.
Yeah, I thought to myself, like, imagine if this was like a cinema release movie and you're sitting there
I
and
know.
you're like, what is happening? Like you get this, obviously, like it's great because obviously all these people are people who are helping this independent movie get
Hmm.
made. And that's what we
Yes.
want. So, and the fact that it got made is obviously amazing.
Hmm.
But it was so funny when you see it go and you think it's almost like a comedy
Yeah.
where it goes and it keeps going and you think it's gonna go on for like an hour,
Yep.
and
And
then
then,
finally it stops and then we get into the movie.
thank God.
Yeah, thank God. But it starts off. The movie starts off where obviously you got Michael Ironside. He's narrating essentially everything around the world of the 70s, the culture, the things that is happening, and then this is basically where Dan Dasmalchian, the fact that I cannot even remember his name. What's
Jack
his name?
Delroy.
Elroy.
Yeah, Jack
Yeah, that's it.
Delroy. Yes.
Jack Delroy, that's it. He is a late night show host
Hmm.
in the 70s, and obviously, there's a lot of inspiration as to who he is and so on, like that, or who he's portraying in a way, not obviously like a real person, but sort of is in a way.
Yeah.
And he is he's a late night show host, but then obviously one of the things that starts to happen is that he's constantly trying to win more viewership. And
Hmm.
I mean that sounds pretty familiar,
Yeah.
but he's
Weird.
trying to win. He's trying to win more viewership. He's trying to get more people to join in on his show, his talk show, and it ends up almost becoming about the movie is essentially about the depths that he goes to get to those moments and
Yes.
the price that he will pay because of it.
Do you sell your soul
And
to the
and how
devil? Hmm.
Absolutely, and
Yes.
that's it, and that's what I find really interesting about it. But also, what I like about this and what we talk about is I really do like this film. Sort of goes to like weird places that you don't expect. Like when
Yes.
I first heard about this movie, I didn't know how serious it was going to be. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know if it was going to be like a full on like a tape recording, very serious, like of the 70s sort of thing, and it was going to be very realistic.
Yeah.
And then when I watched it, it's very weird.
It's the flow of it is very strange because it's like the narration and then like what proceeds to happen that night, and then it's kind of, and even like the flashbacks further on with like what's her name with the girl. So very weird, but I was intrigued by it. I loved it. I was
Yeah,
like, this is I like the vibes of it because it's not what I was anticipating it to be.
exactly. And that's
Hmm.
what I like about this movie. And I think that's what a lot of people do like, is that it caught people sort of off guard a bit, because
Hmm.
we didn't necessarily know what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And when I say what I mean by it being weird, is that it has like these weird moments that like you don't expect, and you definitely don't expect from a movie like this.
Hmm.
But what I do like about it, and what I really mean by weird, is like what you're saying, is that it's very unexpected, this movie, and
Yes.
it makes this movie more unique. And that's what's really cool, because when you watch it for the first time, it is very unique, and it is all, you know, you can't determine, like I always say in this, I say this on this all the time, but for me, unpredictable horror is always the best, because we've
Yes.
seen it all,
Hmm.
so we want to see something that we haven't seen before. And that's when late films like Late Night with the Devil are exciting, because when you're before you watch it, you don't know what it's going to be, and
Hmm.
when you watch it, until you get to the end, you have no idea what it's going to be and what's going to happen.
Right. Because at the end, you're still waiting for like something else to kind of like, weasel its way in. I don't know. I just watched it again today to prep for it, and
Yeah,
I still stand where I stand.
yeah, it's so basically, yeah, so Jack Delroy, if that's his name, because I've forgotten already,
Yeah.
but David Dan Desmalchian, basically he's his host. We start off, as I say, we're on this journey, he's doing this host, basically it's Halloween night and they're doing their live broadcast.
Mhm.
He has his sort of, I don't know, is he like, do they call him a co-host in it? I'm not too sure, but he's sort of mate, as I call him.
Like his sidekick,
um
Gus.
his little sidekick, that's it, yeah. So
Yes.
he's with him, and he is like, for me, almost like the good of the movie. He's like the
Hmm.
good, like he's like, if you've got a good person and a devil on your shoulder of Jack Delroy, he's like the one on his shoulder saying, don't do this or do this, and so on.
Hmm.
And that's how I feel like with this movie, is like he's got like the, you know, him on his shoulder doing good, but then he's got the viewership and the ratings that are the devil on his shoulders, and he's got to try and think about which one he's trying to go for. And obviously, we know where that goes.
Yes.
So what happens is, one of the first things he does, he introduces a like a psychic, a medium, and so on. And I like how they do this, because you sort of, when you're watching it, you're still sort of undecided whether it's bullshit, until obviously
Yes.
we get what happens. And I like how they do that, because obviously, like for me, I think all that sort of stuff is bullshit anyway.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
so I know my partner completely disagrees with me, and she thinks everything's real. But for me, like, I think all that's bullshit. I like the fact that they almost, the way that it's shot, the way that they do that. I like the fact that it feels like that, where they're like, they're not, at that point, they're not trying to say to you everything this person's doing is real. It
Yes.
could be, it could be fake.
Hmm.
And he could be just be like, you know, he could just be pulling it out of his knowledge of understanding how to read people or read a room. And I
Yes.
like that. I think that's a really clever way of doing it. Obviously, we know where it goes, but
Hmm.
I like, at that moment, you're like, he could be shitting you, and this other guy, who I'll talk about in a minute, could be like, right. But what's cool is that, and what I love within this moment, we get part of the comic relief of the movie, where they go to the crowd, and you get this guy who's like a proper fucking idiot, and he's like almost joking, like, but like not joking, but the crowd are absolutely loving him.
I
um
love that part.
and I love that, because he's not getting what anybody's saying to him at all. Like, he's trying to, I think he's trying to say that somebody's coming through, and he's coming through for this guy, but this guy's like so like doesn't really understand anything. So every time this guy's saying to him, "Oh, it's this person," or they're saying this, he's just like, "I don't know," like, you know, and he's saying something weird.
He's like, he's like, oh, what's your wife's name? And then he like gives it because he thinks that she like crossed over, and he's like, oh no, she's still alive. And like
Yeah,
the like how it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. I was dying because it just felt like real. It felt like this is
yeah,
how a talk show would be, and like the norm of the banter, and it just solidified like the ambiance and like the
yeah.
atmosphere. Yes.
Yeah, and I like that as well because, like, obviously the movie goes into like different territories throughout of it as well, and it does play like it does continue to have its foot in like a form of like comedy, but
Yes.
like once we get into the heavier moments of it, then that's when that sort of you know, further we go into the film's darkness, the less we lose those sort of like moments with, you know, the guy in the audience.
Yes.
Also, as well, sitting next to him, we have someone that, and it'd be interesting to speak to you about that as well. See if you have
Yes.
your own opinions on who that is or what it might be. But we
Mm-hmm.
have some guy dressed as a skeleton sitting next to him, who I feel definitely plays a bigger part in all of this.
Same.
Um, yeah, so that would be interesting to talk about that as well. Um, because I think we're getting to moments like that a little bit later.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so what I like about this is that yeah, we start off where it's a lot about Jack, a lot about the show, a lot about him trying to bring his viewership up and how he's going to do that. We start off, as I said, with some guy. I can't even remember his name. I should write this shit down. I really should. But the guy that's like the psychic guy anyway. So he
Gus.
ends up. What's his name?
Gus.
Gus. That's it. Yeah. So
Yes.
he. Oh no, he's Gus, his friend, or is he the psychic? I can't
Oh,
bloody remember.
he's the sidekick on the show.
Oh yeah, who's the psychic guy, the medium guy?
Oh,
Is it
Christu.
Christu? That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
See, as soon as you say it, I remember, but I'm too fucking dumb. Anyway, so Christu, anyway, so he does this, but then when he's done this successful sort of like mediumship sort of thing with somebody in the crowd who he connects with them, saying it's like their son that committed suicide or whatever it is. Anyway, he then before they cut to like a commercial break, he actually gets somebody comes through to him,
Mm-hmm.
and you can then this is the moment where you start either going, what's he doing? Is it bullshit, or is this where we're starting to get into what the movie's gonna become? And it
Mm-hmm.
becomes about like a possession, so to speak, and it becomes about a darker side to all of this. And that's exciting because that really makes you like excited about where the journey you're going to be on with this movie. But like we've already said, it's really unpredictable because you're like, well, okay, where are we going to go next with this?
Right. When
Um,
what is gonna come up, and like what is he gonna bring out? What is he invoking? Like what is he seeing? And you're kind of like on that disbelief side of it. Like you're just like, well, it's probably like everyone I'm saying it's not real. But then you start seeing things and you're like, okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
you're like, where is this going to go? One of the places, obviously, it goes is that we are introduced to another guest on the show, who basically is a flat out piece of shit.
Yeah.
And
Yes, he is.
basically, it's another person whose name I can't remember, who looks more like the devil than any of them anyway.
He does, and his name is Carmichael.
That's it. Thank God you're here. Jesus Christ. I promise everyone, if you're listening or watching to this, I promise I will try and start writing down the names of the characters because I'm so fucking bad.
I'm
It's
the same way.
ridiculous.
I like literally do not, when I do my shows, I don't prep, and I have to like pull up my phone and be like, who is this person? But
Yeah. Well,
I
yeah,
feel
but you've
that.
got a really good memory, luckily. I'm just dumb as fuck. But so yeah. Oh, so yeah, so Carmichael, who's a guest on the show, he is a what do they call him? A debunker, so to speak. Like he's
Yes.
basically trying to say all of this is bullshit. Not just the show, but that's his profession, where
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I basically scientifically and logically try and basically say this is all shit. But also, he's got a nice check that if he's ever proven wrong and it
Mm-hmm.
is factual that anything happens, he's going to give him $500,000. I think it is, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like 500,000 or something like that.
Yes.
But like I said, it's funny because one of the things that I genuinely thought that he was going to play a darker moment or darker purpose in this movie because he looks like the devil.
He does. He looks so evil, and I think that adds to
Yeah,
like how much hatred and how much like disdain I had towards him throughout the movie
Yeah.
because I was just like, he's such a rat. And then I was
Yeah.
like, what is he gonna? And I started thinking too in that regard, but
Yeah, because he's got like this almost like the devil sort of goatee sort of thing. He's
mm-hmm.
got like this red sort of velvet sort of jacket and stuff, and he is like you know the stereotypical, almost like one of the versions of a stereotypical devil that they have in movies. You know,
Yes,
and I thought that he was going to have a darker element of it, but obviously, you know, if you know he comes to not be when we get further into the movie, he's a piece of shit and he does some horrible things,
yes,
but he's not what we think he's going to be. So, anyway, so you have this guy who's on the show, trying to debunk everything. Obviously, you've got the psychic guy. Already forgotten his name. He's here. He's there. Doing his psychic stuff. So they're almost like they're arguing a lot with each other and
mm-hmm.
so on like that. And then at some point he starts getting really ill and starts puking up black slime stuff everywhere. It's at that
Yes,
point you're like, oh, okay, so like this is real. There is something really going on.
mm-hmm.
And then the other guests and the big part of the movie, and obviously this is where we sort of start really going into the movie, is where we're introduced to the girl that I don't know her name.
Jane.
Jane, that's it. And then also the somebody who's like a psychologist person that is basically working with her.
So that's Jane, and then the girl is Lily.
Is Lily. That's right.
Yes,
Should
yes,
remember Lily because demons are always called Lily or Lilith.
yes.
So I should remember that. But once again, I haven't. This is why nobody gives a shit about my show. I'm talking about it. This is why I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
You
Everybody
do
just thinks I'm a
though.
fucking dick.
It's so hard to
Um,
remember names though in a movie because I get the same
yeah,
way. I'm like, and the only reason I know names is because like I've watched this movie quite a bit 'cause I enjoy it.
yeah.
But like I'm with
Well,
you.
that's the
Any other
thing.
time I'm like I don't remember the name.
Well, anybody asked me about a shot in the movie and then how they did that and all this sort of stuff, I'm like, yeah, this is how you did it. But then if you ask me about somebody's name who's integral to a movie, I'm like, I've got no fucking clue. I don't
I'm
even know
blank.
Dan Dasmalchian's name in it. And he's the main character. This is why I should be doing this. So everybody, just let me know. I should stop.
No,
But
keep going, keep going. We don't care.
but anyway, so we're introduced to Lily and
Jane.
That's it, yeah, that's it. And basically, you've got a psychologist, and basically, she is. So at the start of the movie, it becomes like one of the things they're showing is almost like a documentary around Satanism and this group of people that are Satanists, and they're performing rituals. Obviously, something that comes in very important later on, and
Yes.
to Jack Delroy himself as well.
Mm-hmm.
And she basically was a kid that was part of this satanic cult, but everything got burnt down and she survived. Is that
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes. Yep. Yes,
For
absolutely.
once, I'm right.
100%
So
BP. Good job.
I got it.
Yes.
I paid attention to that part. So yeah, so basically we have this psychologist that essentially is like I think she's essentially like basically mothering her, but
Mm-hmm.
also studying her at the same time.
Yes. Yep.
So now she's looking after her, and they bring her on the show because they're trying to talk to her. But then obviously things start going a bit more sinister because Jack, what he's trying to do is obviously he's doing this because he wants the viewership. He wants to be the top dog. He wants to
Yes.
be the main late night show talk host. I
Mm-hmm.
almost said that completely wrong. That's a tongue twister.
It is.
He wants to be the big dog, but to do that, he knows that obviously he has to do something. And obviously, this is 70s; it's all live and so on. So he needs to do something that gets him to that point, and he's doing that live. And what that thing is, he's trying to do a live not an exorcism, is it? Or is he's trying to bring out essentially a demon spirit or demonic spirit live on air.
To prove
And
that
he's
it's
doing
real.
that through Lily.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, to prove that it's real. Yeah, that's it. To prove that it's real. And so obviously that will mean that he gets the ratings and he gets obviously to be the biggest late night talk show host out there.
Yes.
But it is a horror film, so it's gonna go absolutely tits up.
Yes, thank God.
So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So from this point onwards, I think now people will sort of, if you've seen it, you know. If you haven't seen it, then I don't know why you're watching or listening to this. You should be bloody doing that first. Do it the other way
Please.
around and then
Yes.
come back to this. But basically, this is where the movie is basically going. You've got the skeptic who's trying to disprove it. You've got the psychologist who's basically there with the person that she's mothering. But then you've got Jack Delroy on his own sort of mission to prove himself and basically go, I want to be the big dog. But unfortunately, he isn't always trying to think of the best way to do that, which is where Gus, I remembered his name because you said it.
Yes.
Gus, who he's his good angel on his shoulder, is there to try and guide him straight. And it doesn't work that way. So so let's get into sort of like the nitty gritty of like what the movie is, because obviously that's the thing with me. It's not just talking about the movie; it's talking about the moments in the movie. It's talking about what the movie is and so on. One of the things that I start off with a lot with, because it's something that's obviously incredibly important to the movie, is the performances.
Yes.
And this is a movie where, if you don't have performances that are going to guide a movie like this, it's not going to work whatsoever.
Right.
And luckily, we really, really have it in this movie.
I love it. The casting is so spot on. I feel like every person fits. I think I was mesmerized by David's performance because I loved him as Jack, and I loved the one half that's like, you want to root for him because you want him to like succeed, but then you see like the evil side and like find out what kind of has gone down, and it completely changes your perception of him. But I love that David can play both of those roles because he's so charming, but also he's extremely evil.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. He manages to play both sides of it, and he captivates you from the start of being this person, but you're still captivated by him by the end, to the point where you feel sorry for him in a way, but then you don't, because by the end you know what he's done.
Yes.
And then you're like, oh, okay, like they always say, like, there's no sympathy for the devil, so to speak. And that's the thing, isn't it? Where you want to feel something for him in a way, because, but then you don't, then you know the depths of the evil that he's gone to try and do what he's doing, and the way that he's manipulating people or trying to get people to do stuff for his own benefit, and how all of this is for his own benefit.
Yeah.
He carries that very, very well throughout the movie. So I think it was very good casting. It's absolutely perfect casting. But it's one of those movies that has fantastic performances all the way through it. Like, every person in it, every character in it is played on point by the people. Like, the people that are playing them really get who the characters are.
Completely agree. I like Lily, like the young girl's performance, her presence, and even because this movie, and I don't know how you feel about it, but it doesn't have a lot of like jump scare moments, and it doesn't have a lot of like extreme gore, but it's just like the tension and the buildup. So when she comes on stage and she's literally just staring at the camera, and like when they break away and the music's, and that's another thing I just want to shout out so quickly is the music. Like the late night music.
So good.
I love it so much. It's such a vibe, but then you add that happiness, and then you just see her staring at the camera. I remember the first time I watched it, I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, she is terrifying.
Yeah. And I think I read this, and I could be completely wrong, and I think this was her first movie, because I think she's Australian. I think she's an Australian actress. I could be wrong, but I think she's Australian. I think this is her first movie. And what an incredible like performance, because she just feels so natural being there, because it does. What I love about her performance is that it is exactly what it needs to be. Like, it's off kilter, like it feels very off, but that's because she's a kid that's on live TV who's possessed by something, so it's meant to feel off. And I love that, and I'm glad you mentioned about it, because that's what some of my favorite moments in the movie is her constantly staring into the lens. Like, it's the moment when she sits down and is staring into the lens, or when you've got the shot behind them all as they're closing off and she just turns round and just stares. So you know that there's something more to her. You know there's something off to her, and you know that there's something evil about her. But the problem is that even though there is something evil about her or evil in her, there's still an innocence to her that you then also, you start to get, especially as a parent, like you start to get a little bit worried for her because she's still a kid. But then once again, it becomes about she's not the evil part of the movie, which is once again very clever.
I love it.
And there's so many different directions where that evil can go
Mm-hmm.
in this movie, and it ends up being a place where it's quite, you don't necessarily expect the evil to be as much as where it goes, and that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That they were like, we're going to go to that place, and then hopefully people won't expect it, and then it will have a bigger impact on the movie, which obviously it does.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like I absolutely love. I think it's Ingrid Torelli. I think that's the actress
Yep.
who in the role. Absolutely phenomenal, and I really I hope that she does more. Like I hope that I don't even know. I might have even seen her in other things recently. I don't know, but
Right.
I hope that she does more because she's fantastic in it.
Same.
But as I said, everybody performance wise, absolutely fantastic. Gus, as I said, I think
Oh,
he's
I love him.
fantastic.
Yes.
He's so good. You don't want. He's one of those people who's like a little Mario man. Like you don't want anything to happen to him.
I know.
But it does, as we know,
Yeah.
in like obviously a standout scene, which we'll talk about as well.
Mhm.
And I think you're great, like right as well when you're talking about the great music as well.
Yes.
And I think that really leads into something else that I want to talk about, and obviously will probably be quite a big part of this because once again, this is more than talking about just the movie. It's getting into what the movie's process and how it's made and what it looks like, and when we're how the movie is represented.
Mm-hmm.
And what this movie is trying to represent is obviously 70s and 70s talk shows and 70s people and 70s music and 70s wear and so on like that.
Yep.
And I think that they do a really, really good job at making this. I think there are people online who have complained about this movie because it looks very 70s,
Mm-hmm.
but they could have gone a bit further in making it. So we've mentioned this before we started recording this, but you've got what I call the WNUF special or whatever.
Yes. Yes.
The WNUF special thingy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that film, I would say, definitely delivers a more true aesthetic or look of what that is.
Yes.
But that's because they've gone fully on it.
Completely
whereas
agree.
this movie, it like they have like a filter over it that makes it look very 70s, but it doesn't have like more flickering lines, and it doesn't have the grading or the grittiness and so on of the 70s. So I get why people might have a little bit of a problem where they're saying it's from the 70s, but it doesn't look as much as something that we would watch in the 70s.
Right.
But at the same time, it is a movie. And they are trying to, like, the way I look at it is that this recording is something that they've remastered.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I look at it.
Yes. And that's a good way that's actually like a good way to look at it. But I thought it looked great. And then the huge uproar for the AI, because that was like one of the biggest, like they wanted to boycott the movie. And I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever fucking heard, because like they use practical effects for one of the most intense scenes of the movie. So like they obviously had an AI person do the commercials. I think it was like 10 seconds of the movie. And I'm like, for people to be losing their minds over, and I understand though, that's the part of it. I get like artwork and artists that could have contributed and it would have been a real person doing it. I understand 1,000%, but like majority of this movie is independent. Majority of this movie, the effects were all real. Like I would rather take practical effects over a 10-second like a fake commercial, but that's just me.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very difficult, and you're right, and it's a very difficult line to work to look at. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you're trying to like boycott a movie because of it, I think you're taking possibly that a little bit too far, and each to their own.
Yes.
But I think like you might be taking it too far, because you're right. The point you're making is right, that like everything that costs money making a movie. So if you've got all this budget and you're trying to work towards some fantastic special effects and practical effects, then if you can try and create something where it's like you're saying, like a 2-second, a 3-second, a 10-second moment of the movie where it's just a thing, but AI can do that, but you're spending the money in the right places of practical effects, I can see why they would do it.
Right.
The other way of looking at it for me, and where my problems with using AI, and it's not just with this movie, but with AI is, say for example, you take myself. So, and we've spoken about this as well. So I'm somebody that I've always wanted to be a filmmaker and so on. Like everybody on the show knows this. They're probably sick of me talking about it, but there's a purpose. There's a point why I always talk about it,
Mhm.
because it's one of the main elements of why I started the show and still do it. But filmmaking, like, so for example, for me, I don't have a budget when I make movies.
Right.
So everything that I put into it is my own money. So sometimes AI, because it's free and it takes like 20 seconds or less or whatever,
Yeah.
dependent on your internet speed,
Yeah.
for someone like me, it's an inexpensive way. Not that I have, I'm not saying that because I haven't used AI. I'm not clever enough to know how to bloody use it anyway. But I haven't used AI. But if I was, like, for someone like me and other people out there that are filmmaking, it can be a tool to create something when you have no budget whatsoever.
Right.
And that I'm sort of there for. The only problems I have when it comes to films like Late Night with the Devil is that it is a very low budget movie. I mean, we've seen the fact that it has at least 8 billion people help make it at the start of the movie.
Yes.
But but the difficulties I have with AI in a movie, say like Late Night with the Devil, is that you do still have websites, say like Fiverr, where you can pay somebody a small amount of money to create something like that for you. Or there are artists out there that they could go to where they can create this for free because you're saying you're going to get a name on a credit of a movie.
Yes.
And I think that's where I have difficulties with that. If you are a movie that has been given an actual budget, that there are ways that, like you're saying, it's great that they're putting it in the right places. But I think for me, the uproar of using AI isn't necessarily the fact that they're using it. It's the fact that there are people out there, artists that could have created for something for the movie, either for free because they're getting their name on it, or they could have done it for a very small amount of money.
Right.
But they sort of chose not to and went the AI route because it's free and it takes, like, literally somebody probably did that in, like, typed it in and went 70s aesthetic with a goblin or a skeleton because it's Halloween.
Yeah.
Press button and then they got it and they're like, good enough, that looks cool.
Yeah.
So I do get the uproar, but at the same time, what is that doing for the story of the movie and from the journey of the movie? The bits that are used for AI in this movie do not affect the telling of where we go from A, B to C.
Exactly.
They're just imprinted.
Yes.
So I get it. I get the uproar because I don't personally like it. Like, as I said, for people like me who don't have a budget, use AI for what you can,
right,
because it will help you on your journey and it might help be able to create something bigger for your movie. But if you do have a budget, I do think that they should look at alternatives of going, well, the alternative is AI, but they should be looking at the traditional of going, there are people out there that might be able to do something for us for free.
Exactly.
Because we're going to go, you can get your name on a credit. So that's my problem with it. But I wasn't, in all honesty, I've spoken more about it than I wanted to.
Yes.
But that's because I have a mouth that won't shut up.
It's okay, but I'm glad that you.
But I'm sure people out there will probably disagree with me.
No, well, I'm glad to see your side of it, and also too, like, I mean, it's good that you acknowledged it because, again, like I said, I don't think it was intentional. Like they were just like, oh, we're not gonna have like an art. I think it was just like strictly like a budget thing because they were on such a tight budget. But I mean, there are other movie companies that are huge movie distributions and production, and they use AI. Like Sam just went and saw Wicked, and he said the opening scene, which, spoiler if you haven't seen it or if you don't even care about Wicked, but he said like there's a puddle and there's a hat, and the hat was fake. It was AI. It was
like AI.
Yeah, and he's like, you couldn't put a real fucking hat for the opening, and like with. And I see that point. I'm just like, well, they could have done that. That probably would have been cool to do that, but they went the other route. But they had so much money, so I digress with that. But
yeah, absolutely. I think it just, as we know, the problem with Hollywood is that it's lazy, but also wants to do everything for free.
Yes,
and AI is free. So they will always go to it. The difficulty is knowing that the further along we go in it and the development of it means that artistry will be lost. And I think that that's where a lot of people's problems are with it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, when you get a movie like Late Night with the Devil, where it's literally on the screen goes, it doesn't. It's not affecting the journey of the characters, of the journey of the story,
Right.
and it's not affecting the fact that they spent money on practical effects. So anybody out there that got pissed off by it, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are somebody that didn't give a shit about it, I also think you're right to not give a shit about it.
Right.
I think either way anybody looks at about this, they're right.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it.
And that's
unless you're somebody that literally said, I'm never watching this movie because they use AI. To be fair, you're doing a disservice to your own self, because you should be watching this movie because it's bloody brilliant.
Exactly.
But yeah, so the journey of the movie is interesting. But yeah, we were talking about aesthetically. It does a really good, I think, job of the costume department. The set design is absolutely fantastic in this.
Yep.
I mean, it looks like if you walked onto it, you felt like you would be taken back in time.
Yep.
And I think they do a really good job at making you feel like you've gone taken back in time.
Yes.
And then, like you mentioned as well, the music, the band that is playing, the live band on it is absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
I think they really, truly nailed what they were going for. And like I said, in my head, even though they could have made it look even more 70s, in my head, I feel like this is just because they got this tape, because of this is something that happened in the 70s. I feel like they remastered it for now, for it to be released to show everyone.
Yes.
That's how I'm getting away with it in my head.
I love that, though, because it makes sense.
I'll probably think the same. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've spoken about performances. We've spoken about obviously the way that the movie looks. They do really good job in regards to all of it. But I also like, this film is filled with a lot of moments, and I really like that. So, and there's not like, it's not a very long film, but I like that there's no lulls in it.
Yes.
But it's made of a lot of really standout moments, and that's a sign of a very well made movie. Yes. Where they're like, okay, like we're trying to fill out every moment without going, here's the start, everything's going to happen, then we're going to filter into the middle where it might get a bit boring, but then at the end we're going to ping it all back.
Yes.
It doesn't feel like that. It feels like the film is continuously going and bringing in new things, and it doesn't get boring because you're like, it's constantly bringing in something new.
Yes. They give you like a little touch of things. Like you'll get like a little, like the glitch on the TV screen, you know, when they're like talking and like Christo's on there and it's like the glitch comes through and you're like, okay. And then like when he starts to project the black stuff. And I love the shot when it goes from when it was part of the film or like part of what you were seeing from the broadcast to like the actual footage, and it's black and white and he's like, something's not right. And he screams it and like his veins. I got like chills when I saw that. I was like, oh shit, like this is gonna get serious. You know what I mean? And you just keep like anticipating what's gonna happen afterwards.
Yeah. And also that would be interesting as well, because you mentioned like the sort of black and white bits as well. I'll be really interested as well to know what you think about those moments that aren't what we see as in the broadcast. So when it's the behind the scenes stuff, what do you think about that? Do you like those moments?
I loved it. I love that they did it in that regard, that like you said before, that it wasn't just completely found footage and it was just the broadcast. I love how we got to see the discussions behind the scenes. Like the producer, I hated him. Just like the clips that you did see him, like he was an asshole to a T. So there goes to casting being perfect. But like I loved seeing like the on-screen faces and then like what happens behind the scenes, quite literally in every regard of like what was happening for the TV show. Do you know what I mean? So I thought it was great. I thought it was a breath of fresh air.
So the interesting thing for me is that I don't like those moments.
You hated it?
and the reason it is because I wanted to be within that set that could like, I wanted it to be more claustrophobic, even with like, you've got the crowd that are watching that moment, we're watching that moment, and everything that is happening in front of us.
Yep.
And I couldn't keep thinking about like what, like, they don't film behind the scenes in the 70s and stuff like that. They're like, they're not filming behind the scenes of like conversations where if they get out, like they're fucked because their conversation's all about like screwing these people over
Yeah.
and like this and talking about ratings and then swearing and stuff like that. So I feel like for me, every time they did those moments, it wasn't like, it never felt like what I think like was the intention, where it was like a peek behind the curtain. Like
Right.
it felt like for me, it felt like filler. Like it felt like they and I didn't want that, because what it did
Yes.
is it took me away from the momentum of the movie, of what was happening on the stage that was live.
I
And
see that.
I wish that it kept it, once again, it's almost like that enough special, like we've mentioned already. Like
Yes.
that is like, it's a continuous thing. If people haven't seen it, go and watch the enough the WNUF special
Please.
thingy, Halloween special.
Yes.
Go and watch it, because you'll see what I mean. But it's very, very, it's real. Like the way that it works, like you've got a zillion adverts, then it cuts back into what's happening, on the movie,
Yeah.
and then it'll cut back to more adverts, and then it gets like to the point where you find the adverts funny, then you get really pissed off by the adverts because it's continuous, and you're like, I want to watch the fucking movie.
Yeah.
But
What's
then
gonna
you get
happen?
over that, and and then you get over it, and then you're laughing your ass off because these adverts are so bad, so funny, but so reminiscent of the time that they've done such a great job. And that's what I sort of, when I watched that, that's the thing that I took, where I was like, I wish that was more like Late Night with the Devil,
Yes.
where rather than giving us the behind the scenes stuff, which for me doesn't make sense.
It took you out of it.
Yeah, it took me out of it, and that's one of that's probably, it's either one of the or the only problem that I have with the movie, is that I wish it was all on stage and everything was happening on stage, because I think then it would have given us more time for like mayhem. Like it would have
Yes.
given us more time for things to go wrong. And I know a lot of that will be like to do with budgetary constraints as well, because obviously the more you do, the more money it's going to cost. So taking a camera backstage, turning it black and white while people are having a conversation, it becomes about performance. That doesn't cost anything apart from the actors.
Right.
Whereas adding an extra scene of like blood or something practical happening, it costs money. So I completely get it.
Yeah.
But for me, I just wanted this focus solely to be on the live broadcast. And that's all I wanted, but I didn't
feel
get
that.
that.
I feel that. And you know what? It would
It,
be interesting to see it in the way that you want it, because I think adding more to it would have just enhanced it even more for me, because I obviously love this movie, but I would have liked to see it that way too. So I guess like either way, it's like not too bad, because also what you were saying,
yeah,
it's not like it made you feel a certain way about the film. Like you still enjoyed it. It's just,
yes,
if this,
yeah.
it would have enhanced so much more. And I get that. So I totally see that
Yeah,
side.
exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing, and I think that's to the credit of this movie. And you're exactly right saying it, is that it hasn't affected how I feel about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like those moments didn't take me out of it, where I was like, I'm just going to look at my phone and I can't be asked to watch this. Like
Yes,
those moments, I was still interested, because those moments still led where the story was going to go, or we were
exactly.
learning more about certain people. Like we were learning more about Jack Delroy as those moments went on, because obviously we're learning that he's more of an arsehole than what we thought.
Yes.
So they're very important, those moments,
Yes.
to the story and to the character. So there's a real purpose for them, on a story and on a cinematic level, of like trying to tell someone's journey. So for me, in a way, they sort of have to be there. But at the same time, I would have liked for them to be there in a different way, and I would like that to be like more so on the set, because all I have in my head is like more of like absolute chaos on the set itself,
Yes.
and that would have been so much more fun, I think. Like, because we get to the near the end, and there's absolute chaos, and I'm like, it would have been nice to have seen more of that chaos on like a live broadcast rather than taking it out of it. But like I said,
Mm-hmm.
when we are taking out of it for the behind the scenes stuff, we do learn more about the characters and so on. So it's, I don't know, maybe I'm talking shit, I don't know.
But it's good. It's good to voice that, because it's good that you're acknowledging like what you would have wanted from it, but like also to say
Yeah,
that like I still enjoyed it, so it didn't like completely ruin it for me. But like this
yeah,
would have, and who knows, maybe we'll get like another variation of this movie in a couple of years, or someone might take inspiration from it and want the ideas that you're saying and make it more of like a broadcast. So maybe
Yeah.
we'll get something new.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got the moments that sort of like lead you into learning more about the characters, and that is something that happens obviously throughout the movie more as we start getting into talking about where the movie's heading and where it's going. So we get Jack gets his basically hit what he wants, which is a live on screen in front of everyone conversation, so to speak, with a demon or the devil or however people want to see it. And
Mm-hmm.
that to me is obviously such a fantastic scene. It's another example of how good Ingrid Torelli is as Lily,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a moment that I really really love because you've got this really cool. They do a really cool thing where it's her talking, but you've got the demon voice, very Exorcist like, where you have, you
Yes.
know, the yeah, I'm gonna fuck you, blah, 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 blah. That sort of voice, yeah, you know, that sort of voice from The Exorcist, but probably not quite as much as that. But it's like they do a really good thing where you know that there's something else there,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that makes it a lot creepier as well.
Definitely.
And then obviously when the way that she's acting as this possessed person. Once again, they do really cool job with her makeup, really good job with her eyes.
Mm-hmm.
She 100% looks like one of the Manson people. Um,
Yes.
like
She's
the whole
terrifying.
time, I was like, she looks so much like one of the Manson girls. It's crazy.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, so she was in that moment. She's absolutely fantastic. There are things I'll get into this in a minute, but there are, and it'd be interesting to see if you know any of the other ones that I didn't notice. But there are a lot of moments of reminiscence of other movies there, or references to other movies of the horror genre in this movie, which
Oh.
I'm all for because they didn't feel like they were purposeful for the movie and for the story. They didn't necessarily feel like they were shoving it in your face.
Yes.
So I'm going to get into that in a bit as well. I'll ask you that question as well.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically they do that. They do this like live sort of like talk with a demon sort of thing. It doesn't necessarily that at that moment it goes to plan.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Delroy's getting what he wants. Obviously, he's trying to push it, and he's trying to push it too far. He wants to get it again. This is where we get Carmichael, who once again is trying to convince everybody that it's all bullshit. It's all baloney,
Yep.
and it's
It is.
and basically he. I've never said baloney before, but he.
I love
But
it.
he. But he basically is saying like, look, this is all shit, and I can prove it to you. And he actually does it and hypnotizes people. And poor
Yes.
Gus, he hypnotizes Gus into thinking that he's got worms inside of him in one of my favorite moments of the movie,
Yep.
because it's like you were mentioning earlier on, where they're putting the money in the right places, because we get really cool practical effects where he's opening up his little Mario belly.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
he has a giant worm that bursts through his head, and it looks absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
And that's a really fun scene where we go from like a really dark scene with Lily and the way that the way that that is, and it's a very sort of dark moment, and the way that it's done, that scene is a very horror movie scene.
Yes.
Like that's like, and they do it very very well, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really very well made. But this moment is like a different horror movie scene, because this is like a body horror. So your
Yes.
glee as a horror fan comes from two different places. Your glee is like, that's full on horror, and that's like full on like old school possession. I'm not going to say what movie, but you know what I mean. I will talk about it later.
Yep.
But then we get like a proper like body horror, like gross like worms and shit like that. And
Ah,
it's
so
like, it's
gross.
cool because there's so many different moments of different subgenres within this movie
Yes.
in horror, that it's almost like trying to please everyone. But that's such a, you feel so sorry for Gus at that moment.
Poor Gus. I know, and I love Gus. Like he is one of my favorite characters. But it also, that scene was very reminiscent for me of like American Werewolf in London, where it's the dream sequence and it just keeps
Yeah.
going. So like after he wakes up from the dream, and then like the nurse gets attacked in the, so because like when Carmichael stands up and he's like, oh, and you're like, oh fuck, like this is actually happening. And then
Yeah.
when it like turns out and transpires the way it does, you're just like, oh, you're tricky. Like, I like what you
Yeah,
did.
and he does that fucking wink, and I'm like, I want to punch you in the fucking face,
Oh, I
Carmichael.
know. Such
I want to take his jacket and shit in it. But
yes, yes. But he
but
gets
on
what
the inside, so then when he puts it on, he doesn't know.
covered in shit.
Yeah, not that I've done that to a horrible boss before,
Love it. Love it.
but he, but yeah. So that happens, and poor old Gus. But obviously, luckily, he doesn't really have worms coming out of him and stuff, so on.
Mm-hmm.
So then Carmichael's all fucking happy with himself. He's trying to prove everything that is wrong. It's not real. And to be fair, as a viewer at that point, once again, you're like, okay, like, is all of this bullshit?
Right.
Because he's, and that's once again the clever part of this moment. We've already had like some guy at the start, some psychic medium that you're like, yeah, it could all be bullshit, because I think in real life it is crap.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get Carmichael, who's every step of the way is almost proving and debunking everything. But then
Yes.
obviously we do get further into movie where the debunking is sort of no longer there, because he gets them to play the tape where everything happens. And obviously Gus is basically, unfortunately, he's never going to be able to look at his family in the face again, because obviously it wasn't real. They didn't have worms coming out of him, and he's
I
just
know,
there
poor
ripping his
Gus.
shirt open like he's a bloody Chippendale. Um, and it's a poor old Gus, and he looked so upset, and I felt so sorry for himself. He looked
I
so
know.
embarrassed, because obviously that's on live TV, and he's like, oh fuck.
And he already like voiced his
But
concerns
luckily,
about that. Like he already voiced that he didn't want to be a part of it.
yeah,
And that's what makes me so sad is like that's your buddy and he's like telling you like this isn't cool. Like no one's into this and then they still put him out there for his own personal gain and
yeah.
I love Gus. So sad.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Jack Delroy as well, is that, like, as we've said, like, throughout, the decisions are made from an evil place rather than the good place.
Yes.
And Gus is always there to try and you can imagine that they've been friends for so long, but now this need for acceptance from Jack Delroy as being the number one, like he's chasing that number one spot, and now it's like, do or die. I'm going to do everything I can to be number one, no matter the cost.
Yep.
And that is, betraying friends. That is, doing things that I shouldn't do, putting a young girl at risk. The person that I'm definitely fucking, I don't care about her,
Yes.
and,
Yep.
and then also, and then also throughout the movie, like, as I said, like when this stuff, all the revelations about Jack Delroy start coming out, you change your thoughts or the way that you think about him, to the point, like the way that you thought about Carmichael, you start then thinking about that about Jet Delroy.
Yep.
But like I did say, like, you sort of want there to be some form of redemption for him. But then obviously we get the end, and we get to that anyway.
Yep.
But yeah, so and then basically what happens is, at that moment, it's all like, oh, it wasn't real. But then Lily has the amazing idea of going, well, why don't you play back what we did? And then lo and
Mm-hmm.
behold, everything is on there. And then also Jack gets them to slow things down. Then we get to see his wife that passed away. I
Yep.
don't think we mentioned, but his wife was dying as well at the start of the film, and obviously she dies as well. I think it was throat cancer. I could be wrong. I think it was throat cancer or something.
She had lung cancer, remember? Because she said that she
That's
never
it.
smoked. And then
Yes.
Jack, I still, I have my theories of
Yeah, that's it.
what
That's
the
it.
hell
Well,
went
we'll get
down.
into those as well.
Yep.
But yeah, so basically we'll head towards the end of the movie where basically it is real. It is all really happening. Lily is obviously possessed by this demonic spirit. And
Mm-hmm.
then this is where it starts taking obviously a turn for the worse. Gus, unfortunately, he dies.
I know, so
Uh,
sad.
and then Carmichael as well. He also dies producing the check, which I love. That was a really cool little moment where he's producing the check to be like, it is real, take it. But then Lily, with her open head, which is a cool, really cool effect,
Yep.
she destroys him, and then also ends up destroying the person that's been mothering her as well. So we all know that, like, that this demon is a real demon,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't care for anyone.
Nope.
It's just pure evil and chaos.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get like another moment that really takes you out of the structure of what the movie was, like the live broadcast, where Jack Delroy is now taken into this sort of dream state, dream sort of world. Where he's like on his show in moments that we've seen before and so on. And it's a bit of like a weird scene.
Yeah, it
But
is.
then also he's at this like sort of ritual with all these like cult devil people, and another person is there in the background who
Hmm.
may be the skeleton that we see quite frequently in the movie. And there
Yes.
is also something else which I'll ask you in a minute because that'd be really interesting to see if you know and so on. But yeah, so we have all this, and then also like, and it's almost like it's a moment of the decisions, the bad decisions that Jack Delroy has made. We're going through those moments that he's doing, and there's a
Yep.
moment where he's sitting with his wife, who's in essentially, unfortunately, her deathbed,
Hmm.
and he ends up putting this dagger into her. And obviously, this is all not real. This is obviously, in some form of dream scape thing in his
Yep.
mind, or however it's working. I don't really know how it works. I'm not clever enough to know, but it is what it is. And that is almost like a what's the word that they call it? But like it, that's like meaning essentially what he has done, like stabbing her, so to speak,
Pretty much
because
stabbing her in the back.
obviously, yeah, essentially, yeah, just in the front. But yeah,
Yes.
but yeah, so he's stabbing her in the front. But yeah, so he's done that because we basically come to learn that, and I could be wrong. I don't know if you think this is the same thing. That
Mhm.
essentially what he has done is that he's made a deal with the devil. He sold his soul, but he hasn't sold his soul. He sold his wife's soul to the devil,
Yeah, that's
and
exactly what
he
I thought.
because she was dying, he realized that he could give her up instead of himself or something else. He found his way of giving her up, um, and then it means that and his obviously payment for that is for him becoming, the late night show talk host that he wants to be number one. But unfortunately, when you make a deal with the devil, it
Hmm.
doesn't always go the way that you want it to.
No, and
And
it'll take
after this
everything.
moment in this movie, he wakes up with a dagger in hand after essentially what we're guessing in the real world on what they would have seen probably on the live TV event is that everybody's dead. We don't know, like I don't know how much he would have actually done,
Yeah.
but we know that he probably stabbed Lily, and then this is basically making out that he had done all of this, and that's why he's at the end of it. He's saying the words that I think Carmichael. I can't remember the words, but the words that Carmichael said earlier on,
Yeah.
"Dreamer awake," I think it was, or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, he's saying that at the end as if it's like he's going to come out of it, but it's not. It's real,
Yeah.
and basically, he's made the wrong deal with the devil.
Yeah.
And I like that. Like I said, it's weird because I think horror is at a place, like I mentioned, where it's very depressing. And I
Yes.
think because a lot of this depression with modern day horror comes from realism, it comes from mental health,
Yep.
and it comes with a realistic way of tackling that. And also, it comes with a lot of other real elements of life and so on as well. And it tackles them, but it never tackles them in like a positive way. And that's where we are in horror at the moment, where they always end, but they never end on a positive way. They
Mm-mm.
never end of saying like this person's dealing with mental health, but unfortunately this person just dies at the end, and so on. And that's where horror is at the moment, where we're having a lot of like very negative movies that don't have a positive outcome.
Yes.
And this movie is a little bit different because we don't get a positive outcome, but the enjoyment is the journey that you've spent getting there with the idea, with the concept, with the story, with the characters, with the performances, with the set design. Like everything works in this movie that when you get to this ending, even though it's a bad ending, and you know that basically everybody's there dead and Jack Delroy has fucked himself over,
Yep.
you still feel like there's this is like a proper like resolution for the end of the movie, and it works.
I thought it was great. I thought the ending, because I know it was very divisive and people were like, "Oh, well, I did he actually do it? Nothing really happened." Like I like that it brought up conversations of people's different points of views. Like you seeing it a certain
Yes,
way, me seeing it a certain way, but I see it the same way that you do. But like having the discussion after other people have watched it and this and this and this, it's cool. I think that's awesome when you have
yeah,
different outcomes, even though one was made for the movie. I like when there can be discussions of what they thought it could
yes.
be.
Yeah, and that's what, and you're exactly right, and that's what I love about we don't. The thing is, with horror, we don't get to have those discussions often
Right.
because there's so much shit in horror.
Yes.
Like it's one of the. I mean, it's the genre that everything comes out because it's easy to make. I say this all the time, but anybody can make a horror movie. The hard part is making a good horror movie,
Yes. And yes.
and so we can watch as much shit as we want, but then we don't really talk about them afterwards. But with something like Late Night with the Devil, is that we now have the opportunity to have conversations about them after we've watched it. And then everybody has their own certain ways that they look at the movie. And that
Mm-hmm.
opens up a really fun conversation about what they think. Like, what do they think Jack Delroy did? What do they think Jack Delroy did at the end? Like the conversation that we've been having, the things that I've been saying, people might be like, well, he's fucking wrong. And
Right.
I think this way, and that's a good thing, and that's what you're saying, and that's what I really like. That's a good thing, not just for this movie, but that's good for horror because it
Yes.
means that this movie is so good and good enough that we get to have a conversation about it, and then that's exciting
Yeah.
because it means that it's like we're not talking about like going it's shit because of this. We're going it's very good because of this, and now we get to talk about what the meanings are and
Yes.
why it happened and what a piece of shit Jack is.
Yes. And it made me sad because I was like rooting for him. Like I was, wanting him
Yes,
to get to where he was. And then after you find out all the nasty shit that he did and like the conversations with Lily, because when they showed the Abraxas or whatever, and they
yeah,
sacrifice kids for it, you're just like, oh, so like,
yeah,
when Lily's conversing with him and she's like, oh, you're about to be really real famous, Jack. And it just adds so
yeah.
much more to it. And you're like, oh, okay. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
it. And I think the ending as well, when he's standing there, like it's part of me is almost like he realizes what's happened.
yes.
And when he's saying like dreamer awake, it's almost like he realizes that like he's fucked himself over and he's fucked all these other people over.
Yep.
Because like Gus says for in the movie, that he's not a bad guy. Like he's a good guy. He even says to him,
Yes.
like, you're a good guy.
I love
And
that
he's
part.
so on his side, he's so on his team. And you know that Jack's like there's part of you that knows that Jack Delroy is not a bad person.
Yeah.
But what he's done is that because of his need for acceptance, for fame, to be number one, he screws everybody over. And in turn, he's the one that's getting screwed over as well. So
Yeah.
not only is he killed everyone because of his decision that he's made, he's got to live with that. And that's essentially his reward, but it's not a reward; it's the devil's reward
Yeah,
that he gets to,
exactly.
have this other soul that's been destroyed, and yeah, so it ends badly. But then at the same time, like I said, you're not angry with how it ends
No.
because you get to talk about it and then make your own way up, your own conversation up about it. Before we get into production info, because I always talk to a couple of production info and facts. So there are. Now, I just want to make sure I've got them here. I'm sure I have. There are nods, and I did mention this about earlier on. There are nods and moments in this movie that are reminiscent or reminders or make you think of other movies,
Hmm.
other movies within the horror genre. So I've got some written down. It'd be interesting to know if there's any that you know,
Okay.
because these are the ones that I noticed when I watched it.
Okay.
So the owl mask. So there's an owl mask that goes throughout the movie that basically somebody part of this Satan worship place or thing. That mask is almost identical. There's a movie called Stage Fright,
Hmm.
and that mask owl thing is basically almost identical to the mask that's worn in Stage Fright.
Yes.
So I don't know whether that's something that it's always interesting to me, these, because I think about them, but then I think to myself, is that purposeful? Like,
Right.
do they know about that? Like, obviously, being fans of horror, if they're fans of horror, they probably know what stage fright is.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to know whether that was a purposeful decision where they're like, oh, remember stage fright? Well, this is the mask from it or something.
Yeah. Like a nod to
So
it.
that's one of the ones I saw. Also, you've got obviously some of the costumes like Halloween 3. So you've got the skeleton guy, reminds me of Season of the Witch, Halloween 3. But on
Yep.
top of that, we also get the moment where Jack is freaking out, telling everyone to turn it off or whatever he's doing, like just like Halloween 3,
Yes.
like they do at the end of Halloween 3. So that for me was more of a blatant, like, remember Halloween 3, we're doing that. That was more of like a blatant homage.
Yes.
Obviously, Amityville Horror is a very quick one because obviously you've got the photo of Carmichael and he's at the Amityville house, so that's an obvious one.
Yep.
The name in the demon inside Lily obviously is called Mr. Wriggles, which is probably a play on Captain Howdy from The
Yes.
Exorcist. And
Mm-hmm.
then talking about The Exorcist, Gus also starts shouting, "The power of Christ compels you."
Yep. I love
So that's another thing. So
love
he's
that part.
shouting that. So there's a couple of sort of references to The Exorcist. And then when possessed Lily, she starts sort of singing, and that is very reminiscent of Evil Dead.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love as well. And I love that they added that playfulness of like a demon in there that straight away I was like, that's just like the Evil Dead, and I love it.
I felt the same way, and I felt that like solidified it at the very end when Carmichael is dying because he's the last to die. When he holds the check and she says
Yeah,
abracadabra, because remember that when they had the
yeah,
conversation throughout, and like the word, this, not the safe word, but like the one word, and she said
yeah,
abracadabra. And he's like, oh, that's clever. And then she said it. I'm like, that is such a sarcastic asshole like
yeah.
remark right before she kills him.
Yeah, it is.
I
Yeah.
love it.
But were there any other ones in there that you thought reminded you of anything?
I didn't pick up on any others, but I did very much so for Season of the Witch. And
Yeah.
when I was like, after I watched it and I was tagging David and stuff, he conversed a little bit. And I said that one scene with the spinning wheel was very reminiscent of Halloween 3. And he's like, that's awesome that you felt that way. And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you know,
There was definitely moments in the movie where you're purposefully paying homage to certain things without it, like they were doing it in a cool way that was
yes.
purposeful to the movie and the journey and the story
Yep.
rather than just shoving it in your face. Like it very much felt like there's moments in this movie that very much felt like it's like this is for horror fans,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's what's cool about it. So yeah, so for also anybody else out there, if you're watching this or listening to this, if you did notice any other ones in the movie, let me know, because obviously I honestly want to know. I want to know if there's any other like homages, references, or anything like that
Mm-hmm.
to other movies. Because obviously I'm not very clever, so I can't see a lot of them. So yes, so people have got to let me know if they see any, because I genuinely obviously want to know, because then I can go watch it again and go, oh fuck yeah, like there is.
Yeah.
So some production info and facts. Traditional folklore states that if a person makes a contract with the devil for earthly goods, the devil comes to claim his payment in 7 years. The documentary footage at the start of the film shows Delroy at the Grove in 1969 and his wife dies in 1976,
Mm-hmm.
7 years later.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
So yeah, so it's definitely like there's thought put to it,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting.
And I
They've
love
not
that.
just gone, he sold it. There's actual thought to it.
Mm-hmm.
This one made me laugh. So apparently the movie made $666,000, 666. So basically 666 on Sunday, March the 24th of 2024 at the box office. According to the distributor, in all likelihood, it wasn't a coincidence, as box office figures can be manipulated.
Love that.
Basically, it's probably bullshit, but that would be pretty hilarious if that was real.
I remember when that happened
Um,
and I was like, fuck yes, because I was already hyping it up. And
yeah.
when I saw that, I was just like, this is the icing on the cake.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, it probably made a shit ton more, but they like, no,
Nope.
like that's the number.
Yep.
The Carmichael character is based, including physically, on the real life James Randi. Randi was a talented magician who became a famous psychic debunker, and he started an institute that offered a large reward to anyone that could reproduce their supposed paranormal powers in controlled conditions. Over decades, nobody was able to win the money. So Carmichael was actually based on a real sort of person as well.
I love that. See, it makes me love this movie so much more that they put all of
Yeah,
this thought into it and that this, like, some stuff is actually like a factual thing. Like, it just, I love it. It's so great.
Well, that's the thing, and it's a prime example of one of the reasons why I started doing this because,
Mm-hmm.
and like I say this all the time, the genre is more than just movies. It's about everything that goes into making these movies. Like I
Yes.
say all the time, that's why horror movies are the hardest movies to make because to make them good is difficult. But to add little moments like this where you don't people don't think about what goes on behind what we see on the screen, or a lot of people,
Yeah.
whereas I do. And that's something that I've always done, where to me, it's not just about what we see, it's about the process. And that's what
Yes.
this show is all about. It's about not just going, this is the movie and we like it, thumbs up or thumbs down. It's
Mm-hmm.
about how do we get to how do we get to this movie from start, middle, and end? What creates this movie? Is it the performance? Is it the set design? Is it the music? Is it the directing? Is it the cinematography?
Yeah.
And all of that has to come together to create something that you enjoy. And that's what I love, and why I started doing this show is about talking about that. And that's sort of like the couple of those things in there, the production info. That's one of the reasons why I add them in, because they're prime examples of why doing this show is the way that it is. Because like that thing, like the fact that he's based on a real person, not everybody's going to know unless you look it up and then you go, oh, that's cool and that's clever.
Yeah.
But the thing is that people who have made this movie, they're the people that are doing that and thinking that. And and that's what's so interesting about movie making and making horror movies, and directors and filmmakers and actors. It's so interesting to the process of how they create something that all we do is watch it,
Yeah.
and that's so interesting to me.
Totally. I feel the same way. I love when there's so much thought into a movie. And even like the simplest like horror movies, there's still so much that goes into every detail, because it might look simplistic or it might look like, one thing, but there's so much that goes into it. And it's awesome to find out like inspiration, why they did this, why they casted this person. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. So really quickly, before we sort of start wrapping it up about talking about the movie, what's your overall thoughts of the movie?
So this was like a really highly anticipated movie of the horror movies coming out this year, and I loved it. I thought it was a breath of fresh air. I love the take of doing a possession movie in this sort of format because I do love handheld footage. What do you say,
Yeah,
handheld? Yeah, right?
I always say handheld horrors.
Yes,
That's right.
handheld horror. I love that. So marrying a possession movie with, and I love like a throwback. I love when a movie is like in a 70s setting, 80s setting. I'm very nostalgic when it comes to stuff like that. So it was just like checked all the boxes for me. It had me wanting to watch it again. I would love to be able to watch it on the big screen and experience it
Yeah,
on the big screen because I didn't get to. Um, but I love this movie. And it's one of my favorite,
yeah.
one of my like not just of this year, but like in general, like along with The Void and like Creep. It's the newer horror movies that I absolutely just fucking love so much. So
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you as well. I think this was a movie that is definitely one of the best of this year for
mhm,
sure.
mhm.
I it's one of those movies that I'm really, really happy it's had the success that it has. And I'm really, really happy that it's got, and I love that. I'm really happy that it's a commercial success and a critical success, because
Yes.
like it is a movie that it deserves to have that success.
Hmm.
And yes, like we've already mentioned, it did have the whole fucking boycott shit about the AI stuff, and obviously we voiced how we feel about that and so on. And everybody's entitled to how that is, but it goes to the strength of the movie that we people are still talking about it in a very positive manner and going, this is still one of my favorite movies of the year. In some people's cases, it is their favorite movie of the year.
Right.
And it's so easy to see why. But what I love about this, and you're right as well, is that um, one of the things that's cool about this movie is that you can put this movie on like one night, and then a couple days later, if somebody says, oh, I haven't seen this, you're more than happy to sit there and watch it again.
Yes.
And that is something that's so rare with movies, with horror, that you're happy to watch a movie over and over again, and enjoy it every single time.
Yeah.
That happens so so rarely that you're excited. Like another film that I like recently that I will think about things like that is Deadstream. Deadstream is a movie that I put on and I watch it, and if somebody the night after was like, "Oh, I haven't seen this, should we watch it?" I'd be like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
I'd be excited to watch it.
Same.
And that's how I feel about Late Night with the Devil, because I almost feel like there might be something that I didn't see that I'll pick up on or I find next time.
Yes.
And I'm sure that there is.
Yeah, exactly. Every time you absorb something different, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you do, like I said, you get lost in the performances and how good they are. And, you know, whether it's Lily, whether it's Jack, whether it's his mate that I've fucking forgotten his name, Little Mario Man. Shit, what is it?
Gus.
Gus, that's it. Little Mario Man,
Little
Gus. Little Gus, that's it. Just all of them are really done well. So, I mean, look, I've said it throughout it. It's made very well. My only gripe with it is the fact that for me, it takes you away from the live show setting. I wish that it was all done through that, but it doesn't annoy me that much because there's a purpose and a point to it. One, right. I'm sure it was down to budget. Because it meant that they could just shoot some stuff, but also you learn about the characters more and you learn about the journey of these characters as well. So if they take them out, it would probably be less purposeful, or you get less of an idea of who they are. But for me, I'm just one of those people that I love the live setting. It, you know, like for example, you say like a lot of people will say this movies like Ghostwatch.
Yes,
Ghostwatch, obviously, and that's an absolute classic. Yeah. Ghostwatch is a movie that did it incredibly well.
Yes.
And that's, I sort of, part of me wishes that Late Night with the Devil was a little bit closer to Ghostwatch, because Ghostwatch was something that felt real and a bit like the Blair Witch, where you're like, at that time you could have been told that it wasn't real, but then at the same time you're like, but maybe it is.
Yeah, that totally is.
And that's it. Whereas this movie, you know that it's not real, and it almost makes the live setting of it almost redundant. And that's so. But then once again, that's not really a gripe of the movie, because the things that I have a gripe with, there's a reason for them, and that's the point of them.
Exactly.
So I'm with you. I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. I think if certain other movies that I'm not going to say, because obviously I do try to plan on doing the Let's Talk Horror end of year awards at some point, maybe, probably not, but we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Basically, my intention is to always do these things. My problem is that I either forget or don't have time, but I will try. So I won't really say, but this could have easily been my favorite movie of the year, but then other movies came out and maybe it's not. But that doesn't mean that this is like a movie that I think lesser of. It's a very, very well made, put together movie, and I'm happy that it's out there for everybody to see, and it's done really, really well. I think the fact that it's done really well is something that it makes me happier, knowing that it's done really well. And it's not underrated.
No, not underrated.
It's not underrated. That's it. It's undersea. That's it. Really quickly as well, if you have one, do you have a favorite scene in the movie?
Oh my God, I do. And it's so weird because it's not like a scene that has any substance. Like, I'm not saying it has any substance, but I love the end after everything happens and the spinning wheels happening and he's screaming. But I love the shot of the audience and Jack just standing there.
Oh, he's walking out. Yeah.
I don't know what it is about that scene, but like I had like goose. I don't know. It just got me so. It just was beautiful and everything that was happening. And then the reminiscence of H3. I was just like, this movie is perfection. I just loved it. So
yeah.
And I loved this.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, real quick, the shots of the skeleton, because you touched on the skeleton. Yeah. I love when he's in the audience and they just kind of pan to him and he's sitting there. There was something about that shot that just creeped me out too, and so those two I love.
Yeah, so do you have a theory on who the skeleton man is?
I don't see, that's the thing. I don't know who it could be, but I feel like it's very important that it's alluding that it's someone that's important in the grand scheme of things. But I don't know if it's like his wife. I don't know if it was Minnie. I don't know. Who do you think?
Part of me seems to think that he's a form of a collector. And what I mean by that
Ooh.
is like he is somebody there is to making sure that like souls are collected because
Oh.
um because if you there's loads of moments like for example he doesn't almost move the whole time and there's a very quick moment where something happens and the crowd are like shitting themselves but he
Yes.
doesn't do anything
Yes. And he's
and
just.
that moment I'm like oh yeah
Mhm.
and also at that moment where we're in that sort of weird thing where like that dream sort of escape thing where like obviously the horrible things are happening he's there standing right behind Jack as well so
Yes.
part of me seems to think that this skull guy this guy person dressed as a skeleton sort of thing who's probably disguised for Halloween part of me seems to think like he's like a collector that is always there to make sure that it goes like to plan like the soul is collected and if it
Yes.
wasn't then obviously he'd probably try and step in that's how I
Yes.
look at him.
You just literally blew my mind. People that are listening, but like my mouth was open the whole time he was saying that because it makes total sense. And even if that was not the intention, it has to be the intention
Yeah.
because that's perfection. That's so good.
Yeah,
I love that.
exactly. That's what I love. I love that you said that as well because there are things like not just me, but if other people say that, it's like oh fuck, what was it? Oh yeah, when I did the episode about Texas Chainsaw
Mm-hmm.
and the and you, obviously we get the at the end of it, he's got the pretty woman mask on as they call it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I had never thought that that was oh fuck, what's his name? The guy in the wheelchair,
Um. Uh.
Franklin.
Yes, Franklin. Yep.
Is it Franklin?
Yeah.
I think so, or
Yep.
someone like that. Anyway, I could be wrong. I love Texas Chainsaw, so if I'm wrong,
No,
but
it's
the guy in
Franklin.
the wheelchair, I think his name
Yep.
Franklin. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that. Well, somebody mentioned that could be his mask. That's his face that he's wearing at the end,
Could be.
and obviously that, and then he's obviously put all like the pretty makeup on.
Yes.
And that blew my mind because now I'm like, I can't watch that movie without going, fuck that. That is because obviously it looks like him. He's got the curly
The
hair.
black
It's
hair.
got
Yep.
yeah, he's got the curly black hair. He's got his face. He's just got his makeup on. So now I'm like, every time I watch it, that has to be it. Even if it's
Wow.
not, I'm like, now the pretty woman's mask has to be
That's Franklin.
Franklin.
Yes.
And that's it. And that's what I love. So I love it when moments like that happen where people say stuff and you've never thought of it before, and
Yep.
it could be bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I've just said could be fucking shit. And no, and even like the directors could come out and go, "What the fuck are you talking
Yeah.
about?"
What? Like.
But
Okay.
yeah, but in my head, I'm like, I feel like that's like there has to be a reason for him. There has to be something more to him.
Yeah.
He's in these things, he's doing these things, and so on. I feel like he's there where he's like, as I said, like a collector. There's a purpose
Yes.
for him, and that's why he's there. That's how I feel.
Done deal. BP. You.
There we go.
Yep. It's in
And
the
that's
can.
what it is.
Yes.
You heard it here. No, that's fucking it. My favorite scene really quickly, because it is a really quick one to do, is just the possession scene.
Yes.
I'm just, for me, obviously, I'm an absolute sucker for performances, and that to me, and also I'm a sucker for filmmaking and performances and how it works perfectly together.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was one, it was a proper horror scene, and I liked that. Two, the performance was absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
I thought that, just the way that it was all played. But on top of that, I love the filmmaking because they add that little voice over top hers that adds that extra sort of element of not only is she possessed, but it also is scarier because you've got this sort of demon voice that's like deeper than hers and so on. And so all of that moment, that scene in the movie was like great performances and great filmmaking.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the moments in the movie where it felt like a proper horror possession sort of movie.
I completely agree.
So that's why that's my favorite moment in the movie.
I love it too.
So on the show, obviously, I always do the Your First Time segment, which is where I get somebody over, anyone on any of the socials, they send me over their first time horror movie memory, and I read it out on the show. Mm-hmm. I've got a quick one on here. So this one was from Stephanie Kennelly. If I pronounced that wrong, I apologise. That was from Abandoned Thoughts on Twix, which is what I call I've fucking forgotten what it's called. X and Twitter. Yes. It's mixed together. I'll call it Twix. You can find them on @Abandoned Thoughts. They put, when I was young, I asked repeatedly to rent Poltergeist. Great movie. When I was 6, my mum relented. We sat together in a lazy boy and she said, if I got too scared, we could turn it off at any time. During the opening credits, I joked, "Oh, I think it's too scary." I would have done the same thing, to be fair.
Mm-hmm.
She started to turn it off, and I had to explain I was being sarcastic. I loved it. It will always be one of my favorite horror movies. And yeah, I can't disagree with it. Poltergeist is something that has always been on my list of movies that I will cover on the show sometime.
Definitely.
And it's also one of the movies that my daughter always wants to watch. She is obsessed with Poltergeist. I think she's got an absolute underlining affection for anything related to Steven Spielberg. Like Jaws is her favorite movie, but
Yes.
obviously Spielberg had a lot to do with Poltergeist, probably a lot more than what he probably should have,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which is obviously an ongoing running story in Hollywood that no one really knows about.
Right. I would
But
love to
yeah, so
know.
it's cool. Yeah, exactly. But Poltergeist is an absolute classic. One day I will cover it. I have been asked, so I will cover it on the show.
Yay.
But yeah, that's a cool little thing, and I'm glad that you sort of like enjoyed the experience by having a laugh out of it. So that's
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Yep.
Jordana, I don't know if we've ever got yours on the show. I don't know if we did it last time, but what's your first horror memory?
So, like, my first horror memory was I begged my mom to watch When a Stranger Calls. Like, I don't know why at the young age that I did want to watch. No, I think I just said I wanted to watch like a scary movie. And she was like, oh, I got one for you. And showed When a Stranger Called. And I'm like, I mean, granted, the like the three quarters of the movie is shit. The opening's amazing,
Yeah,
iconic, but like that opening scared the like just the music, the strings when
yeah,
like Jill would be doing something, it's like and like super deep and creepy and eerie, and that just traumatized me. But it also just opened the floodgates of me loving scary stuff. So that was like my first.
absolutely. And what's funny as well is that you're right because the ending of it is obviously the payoff, but also it's interesting about how much that ending has inspired so many other horror movies that have come after it as well.
Yeah.
That from a movie like When a Stranger Calls is a movie that not a lot of people still know about
Hmm.
and doesn't really, like within the horror community sort of gets talked about a bit, but not very often.
Right.
But the ending is like a truly iconic horror ending that's gone on to really like influence other horror movies.
Absolutely. I mean, you see so much of it nowadays. You see, like with Scream, you know what I mean? Like just with the
Yeah,
phone call. But, and it's so simple. And I loved how back in the day before technology is where we're at now, where that was terrifying to get like a phone call and
yeah,
to have it be inside the house, because of course it was like a
yeah,
doctor. So they would have two phone lines because that's ritzy
yeah,
back in the day, you know?
yeah.
But like,
Fancy stuff.
yeah, super fancy. But I don't know. I think I'm happy that I got to experience it because I don't think I would be where I'm at now with horror if I didn't have that.
No, and that's cool. And also as well, what I like about this segment as well is like learning like the different ones, and also like When a Stranger Calls isn't necessarily one or that always comes up when people like that's my first horror movie,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
that's really cool.
Yep.
That like it started off differently to what a lot of other people's journey started off, and then obviously it all goes from there.
Yeah.
And then like the reason I do the segment is that we never really forget our first horror memory, whether it's good or bad,
Right. Exactly.
and that's what I love about it.
Hmm.
So yeah, if anybody, as usual, because I'm always running out of them to read out on the show. If anybody wants to have a shout out on the show and they wants their first horror memory read out, all they've got to do is go to any of our socials and just send me a direct message. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Direct message.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know why I fucking didn't know that. A direct message. Just send me one directly to me as a direct message in detail, like Stephanie did. And then I'll just read it out on the show. And also, it's like free promo, so
Yeah.
there's no reason to not fucking do it as
Exactly.
well.
Do it.
So there we go. So that's everything that I've got to say about Late Night with the Devil. It is a movie that is really good. I truly think it's one of the best ones of this year.
Hmm.
It's a film that I look forward to watching again, even though I did actually watch it twice recently to do all my prep and everything.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, I don't know what you're doing while watching or listening to this
Yeah.
first, because now you know everything that happens. But I'd never expect that to happen anyway. I always expect people to know what the hell I'm talking about. And if you don't, then I'm not going to put spoiler warnings at the start. That's on you.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Jordana, now is your time to promote the absolute shit out of everything that you want to.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we'll just start off with Pretty Killer Podcast. I don't have any like recent episodes, but I am rebranding. But still look for me, Pretty Killer Podcast on most socials. I'm not on X anymore.
Whatever it is,
Yeah,
yeah.
whatever Twix, whatever it's called. But you can find me,
Yeah.
TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and then I have the Terrifying Three, which was also known as the Core Four, but we had our first casualty, and now we are the Terrifying Three. You can find us on the same socials, and then I also have one last podcast with Sam, our good friend Sam, Feature Creatures DTF, and you can find us on the socials as well.
There we go. That's it. So everybody, make sure you go and enjoy everything Jordana does, because I truly love having conversations with Jordana, and the reason that I do is one, because she's bloody brilliant,
Thank
but
you.
also, like, as you can tell from our conversations, not just on this, but any conversations we've had, like Jordana truly, like we are kindred spirits, if that's the right thing, where
Yes.
like we both truly love horror, and it's more than just the movies, it's about everything else.
Yes.
So when we get to have these conversations, that's why we love The Void so much, because
Yes.
there's so much more to The Void. And then we get to speak about a movie like Late Night with the Devil,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much more than just what we see on the screen, or what we see on the screen, there's so much that you can take from it.
Yes.
And that's why it's great to have conversations. And Jordana is another person who is out there creating podcasts, a zillion podcasts, that you're on, but also, but you are having those conversations, not just with me on this, but having those conversations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are watching this or listening to this, and you go, I listen to this or watch it because I like the conversations, because they're very honest, it's coming from somebody who truly loves horror, you will get that with what Jordana does as well.
I hope
So
so.
I honestly, like, if you love fun, honest conversations about horror, go and enjoy everything Jordana does, and all of her co-hosts on all of her 100 shows that she does.
It's crazy.
Because you won't regret it, because it's just, as I said, I'm happy to have you on the show whenever, because I know that we're just going to get into in-depth conversations about the love that we have for this genre. Like, this love that we have for this genre runs through the blood in our veins,
Thousand
and
percent.
absolutely, and it's always a bloody pleasure to talk to you all about it. So make sure, please, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any podcast platform, go and support everything Jordana does. In regards to the Let's Talk Horror channel, obviously we are on all the socials. You can support me and my journey over on all the socials. Get involved with everything you can. Obviously on the YouTube channel, you can watch the video podcasts. Obviously, if you're watching this now, obviously you know, but you can listen to them on any audio podcast. If it's easier for you, you can listen to it. We also have the Saturday morning live show that I do every Saturday, unless I can't be asked. But most of the time I do it. To be fair, saying I can't be asked doesn't mean anything. It's basically, sometimes I really, really struggle to find any news that there's a point of me reading out. So then I don't do it. That's why I don't do it sometimes. But if there's a little bit of news that I can go, all right, that's worth me talking about, I'll do it. So you can join me every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. and we can talk about horror. I do that live on our YouTube. So make sure you go over there, subscribe to that. And then also we have Patreon as well. And as always, I have to shout out my honorary creepazoids that I have on my Patreons. I've got Flicks and Friend podcast, Jamie Burns, aka the Disco Doctor of Death, Rob Miller, and Leighton Collins. These are all absolute legends who mean the world to me. They're going above and beyond to support me on my journey through horror. And we're all also on the Patreon as well. If you want your own special episode, I do them every single month. I do a Creep's Choice episode where they choose me a film or whatever it is they want me to watch, and I give them a very, very honest review, exclusive to Patreon. Let's just say the two movies they've given me so far, I haven't been that nice about, and
Oh.
I feel very bad about it. And the next episode that comes out, In fact, that episode will already be out. But one of the other episodes I did, which will already be out on there now, was definitely not very nice. And I felt very bad doing it. But if people on there are going to give me movies that I don't like or things to watch, I'm sorry, guys. That's just going to happen.
Yeah.
But you can head over to patreon.com and have a little bit more of a look for the Let's Talk Horror stuff on there. But there we go. That's it. I'm not going to talk anymore. We've spoken loads about Late Night with the Devil. We've promoted the absolute shit out of everything that we do. But thank you so much once again, Jordana, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, BP. I love when we get together. I love when we chat. And I'm especially happy that it was an amazing, awesome movie like this one. So it's been a pleasure from this side.
Absolutely. There we go. So look, anytime, you're always welcome on the show.
Thank you.
Anytime you need me for anything, you know I'm always up for having an amazing conversation about horror.
Yes.
But for the rest of you, until next time, stay creepy fuckers.